I watched Tetsuo the Iron Man for the second time today, and the first time I watched it was a couple of months ago, and upon first watch I thought this is a film I would like to make a video about or do something about on the channel. And I did talk about it briefly in my previous Cyberpunk East versus West video where I talked about the various output from the Western world versus the Cyberpunk stories that come from Japan. So on the West you had things like Blade Runner, Cyberpunk 2077, Upgrade, things like that. And on the Japanese side, on the Eastern side, you had things like Ghost in the Shell, Tetsuo the Iron Man, Akira, things like that. And I was talking about the fundamental differences, the different worldviews of each part of the world, and how they informed the stories of each side's output and contributions to the genre. So one of those was Tetsuo the Iron Man. And the first time I watched it, I was very intrigued by it. It's a very strange film. It's very weird. Just briefly, it's a Japanese quote-unquote cyberpunk film from 1989. It's only just over an hour long, so I would probably consider it more of a short film rather than a full-length, motion picture. But the question that's been on my mind ever since I first saw Tetsuo is it actually a cyberpunk film? I'm not really sure that it actually is. Now, a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me because Tetsuo is generally considered a quintessential Japanese cyberpunk film. It's frequently up in the lists of top 10s, top 5s. If you ask most people who are into this genre, what are your favourite Japanese cyberpunk films? Tetsuo is probably going to be in their list. So, again, I don't know if it actually qualifies as a cyberpunk film for a number of reasons. Basically, what's missing from this one is the high-tech, low-life aesthetic, which is generally considered one of the main criteria for cyberpunk. It doesn't have that. What this has is a salaryman who out of nowhere just begins to transform and starts to grow metal out of his skin. And all of this happens after the salaryman hits a secondary character who is credited, I think, as the metal fetishist with his car. And you can see there's some strange kind of sexual overtones even with that as well. You see the camera pans across the front of the grille of the car that's hit him, and it's got this sort of like jazz music, or it's not jazz music, maybe like it's more like rockabilly music or something, but it's meant to convey a sensual sort of message there. It's very odd, and so doesn't really conform to most cyberpunk stories as far as I can tell. This one, it isn't set in any kind of future. This one is quite clearly set in the year it was filmed. It's set in the late 80s. There's not been any effort to make any of the settings look futuristic in any way. They look very contemporary to the time that the film was made. The other thing is there's just nothing cyber about it. When you think of cyber, you think of computers and digitization, things like that. This film, Tetsuo, it doesn't have anything like that at all. It's purely mechanical and it's purely industrial, as opposed to, cyber, as opposed to any kind of computerization or anything like that. Usually in cyberpunk, the implants, the metal implants that people get into their bodies, they're digitized in some way. They perform some function, they enhance your limbs. You'll get a robotic hand which is stronger than an organic hand. You'll get cybernetic eyes that enhance your vision, things like that. This is just metal that's, in this film, it's just metal that's sprouting out of his skin for no apparent reason. Now, there's a lot of interpretations that could be made about the film and what the metal coming out of the salaryman, the main character, actually represents. The way I interpreted the film was all of it was just a fantasy of his, like a fetishized fantasy that he's having. Or perhaps they're just the dying thoughts of the secondary character who was hit by the salaryman's car near the beginning of the film. I don't know if anything that takes place in this film is actually happening in that universe. I think it's just all in his head, basically. Because the whole thing seems very, very just grounded, just realistic, up to a certain point. And then he starts to... The first time we see any kind of metal coming out of him was in his cheek when he's looking in the mirror shaving. And from there, I think it just descends into his own fantasies. So he's got this strange fetish for metal, and it's also him trying to change himself. So I suppose there is an element of augmentation there, of limb augmentation, which he is trying to do. And this can be seen at the very start, where you see lots and lots of magazine cutouts of American basketball players. They're all black American basketball players. And so it seems he wants to augment his limbs with metallic parts because he seems to idolize these basketball players. I think he wants to be taller, he wants to be more athletic, he wants to be like them. And the first thing we see him inserting into himself is this metal rod with a sort of thread around it. I'm not sure what it's actually called, but he's cut his leg open and he is pushing that into his leg. And that seems to me like him trying to somehow improve his leg through mechanical means. Again, it's batshit insane because all it is a metal rod. It's not going to do anything except... And then we see in the next scene, once he's got it in, he's running down the road screaming in so much pain. So I think it's just a story about a crazy guy fantasizing about, growing metal parts. Like I said, there's nothing cyber about it. And all the things that are happening to him, all the metal that's just coming out of his flesh, it's about as cyber as, like, tooth fillings or false teeth or something. It's kind of an augmentation, but these augmentations that he's got, they don't seem to really improve him in any way. Not at least up until the end when he is basically he spends most of the film walking around looking like a human scrap heap. And at the very end, him and this other guy who seems to have possibly been controlling things, he has fused with him, and they are basically like a fused together human scrap compiled rocket car that zooms off at the end of the film. It's very, very strange, but it all seems like pure fantasy to me. Nothing here is taking place in the real world. In Cyberpunk films, books, all those stories, all of the augmentations are actually happening. It's never just in anyone's mind. It's always something that just takes place in that universe. It's a thing you can do. It's technology that's available. So that's why it happens there. But I don't think this is actually happening to the character. I think it's all just in his head, like I said. And there is also the complete lack of a sort of high-tech, low-life aesthetic. He's not a criminal in any way. Usually in cyberpunk stories, it tends to be criminals who use cybernetic augmentations to their limbs in order to commit crimes more effectively, or to just make their lives kind of easier in some way. None of this that's happening to him makes his life any easier. It turns him into a monster. So I'm very, very tempted to just say that the entire film is literally just one long fantasy that the guy's having. It could even be interpreted as that first piece of... It's called rebar, that's what it's called, the metal rod that he puts into his leg. And then he's running down the road screaming in pain because he's just done that to himself, because he's crazy. I think everything that takes place after that is probably just some sort of hallucination brought on by the infection that has resulted from him doing this to himself, because he's living in this strange sort of like a warehouse or something, and it's just metal absolutely everywhere. A lot of it's going to be rusty, and he is just trying to put all of this into his body. So he's done this to himself by trying to put metal into his own body to apparently make himself more athletic, like the basketball players that we see the magazine cutouts of strewn about the place at the start of the film. And I think this is all just the result of his crazy operations that he's performing on himself. There's probably other ways that you can interpret the film, but I can't help but interpret this one in a realistic, grounded sort of way. I don't think because there's nothing else in this film that really strikes me as being fantastical in any way. It all just seems like it's all taking place in his head. Now, there is messaging at the end of the film where the term New World is used a couple of times. The secondary character, who is also turning into a sort of metal man, when he meets up with him at the end of the film, he says, something along the lines of basically welcome to the new world. And as well as that, he also says to him something along the lines of, and this is, I was watching the Japanese version with English subtitles, so I can't really vouch for the accuracy of the subtitles, but basically the new world part, that's indisputable because it's actually, we see it written in English characters towards the end of the film, made out of pieces of metal. And I think he says to him as well as that, the future is metal, or your future is metal. I can't quite remember what it was. And again, it could be a mistranslation. I don't know, because I just saw the English subtitles on the Japanese language film. And it seems to be making a commentary on the fact that we are moving more and more towards mechanization. I mean, the world in the 1980s was pretty well far along on the mechanization side of things anyway. A lot of things were automated. Obviously, by the 1980s, we were well into the Industrial Revolution. So I think it's probably back then they didn't have as much of an idea of how widespread computerization would be, the internet, things like that. They probably imagined it would be more along the cold, hard machinery side of things is where we were going. But I think it's probably a commentary on our future. We're getting further and further away from the natural, from the organic, and heading much more towards the synthetic, the mechanized, the metallic, things like that. So that's probably what he was getting at the end of the film. But throughout the entire film, really the only way I can interpret it is it's all in this guy's head, it's all a fantasy, and it's not a cyberpunk story. I really don't think it is. But I'd be very much interested in hearing your thoughts on why you believe Tetsuo belongs within the cyberpunk genre. I personally don't think it does. I think that is perhaps a, not to be insulting, but a bit of a surface level interpretation of the film. Just because the guy has lots and lots of metal parts now, I don't think that alone qualifies Tetsuo to be within the cyberpunk genre. But let me know your ideas and why you think it does. I'd be very much interested in reading them, and thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to hit the like button and become a patron, which you can do by hitting the link in the description just below this video. It'll be very much appreciated. Every penny helps me keep the lights on around here, and helps me to keep doing what I'm doing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week for the next video. This has been the Bewarecast. Thanks very much. Take care.